On the Writer's Gym podcast today, we're going to be talking about two of the forces that drive most writers on: inspiration and perspiration. Welcome to the Writer's Gym. The Writer's Gym podcast. Build creative confidence and grow your writing life with Rachel Knightley and Emily Inkpen. Welcome to the Writer's Gym podcast with Rachel Knightley, Emily Inkpen and me, Chris Gregory. Hello both, how are you doing and how's writing going this week?
Hello.
Oh, don't ask. Yes, hello.
In that order.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, that's not the most promising of starts, but
it's going superbly. Let's be more.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I could so combine superb and emotional cacophony if I answer that truthfully. Couple of my Writer's Gym coaching clients who are so able, have a couple of prizes now, things like that, both saying, oh, this is going terribly, and then playing back to themselves in third person via me what they've actually done with the year. And suddenly the version that you hear in your head of how awful everything is, it gets so beautifully contextualized because everybody's writing journey is that bit different and you forget what you've already done.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to hear some of that in today's discussion, I think. Rachel, you've chosen the topic for today's discussion. Can you tell us which writerly conundrum we're going to be getting to grips with over the next half hour or so, please?
I would love to. Inspiration versus perspiration.
Okay. Now, I think this is one that will be familiar to most writers. Let's have a look at inspiration. And I know there's a lot of myths about inspiration. So to start the discussion, I want to ask you about the concept that many writers and artists refer to of the muse. Emily, do you think the muse is a thing?
I think it can be. I mean, I was reading a book recently and it was on game design, and it was a very entertaining read for somebody who's worked as a writer in various guises throughout my professional career. I'll save the bit about taking naps for inspiration until a little while. Until a little later in the podcast
taking as well, I think, until we're done.
But there was a bit where it was talking about the muse and sort of accessing the muse, and it was talking about keeping your muse in like a little house in your head and being able to go and talk to the muse. And I thought this was hilarious, and I was scoffing madly at this book. And then I realized that all of these years I actually have a muse already. And I have done. She's called Lola. She's part of my personal sort of branding on my website and everything. She doesn't have words. She has a fully drawn out animated kind of story. She's never spoken until recently. Turns out she's full of sass. I had to give her some words on my website, and it was in game writing, we call them barks. So a non-playable character, an NPC, will say things that are pre-programmed for them to say. You know, they're like 12-word max kind of sentences. And so I put some barks on my website, and I decided to make her bark. And she is sassy, it turns out. But yeah, she is my muse. And she has been since I was about 18. And I've taken her with me all over the place. Every time I start a new notebook, I do a little doodle. Lola's there. If I start a new job and there's a whiteboard in the corner, I draw Lola on there. And yeah, so it turns out I do have a muse, and she's a bit emo and not necessarily the most complimentary of me. Quite disparaging, in fact. But we get on.
It feels like a sister sort of thing going on in a way.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
When you said about it's not that she's flattering you or telling you you're great the whole time, but she's sort of part of you and you've got the relationship.
Or an alter ego.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like, she's not there to like bump my ego up or anything. She's there to kind of tell it like it is. And, you know, and I guess it's like my inner consciousness telling myself, I mean, that's the whole point of a muse, isn't it? It's like, you know, accessing your inner consciousness and being able to say, yeah, she does that. And she's, sometimes a bit critical. But yeah, we get on.
And you can see Emily's muse, Lola, on your website, emilyinkpen.com, can't you?
Yeah, she's everywhere.
She's everywhere. Yeah. And so, Rachel, if the concept of a muse is a thing, how should we as writers use and harness that muse?
For me, it all comes back to the paint palette. You would never in a million years get a painter saying, oh, I couldn't possibly mix that shade with that shade because my mum might be offended. I don't know exactly what it would look like when I get there. So a lot of what I'm there for with other writers, and absolutely what I am there for with myself, because it's not something you logically learn and then you've done it. It's a daily thing. You've got your memory, you've got your imagination, you've got your questions about the world, your observations about the world, and you will mix those colours differently every day of your life. They will come up in different combinations. So for me, rather than what it is, in a way, it's the access to all the bits of you is how I think of it. So I don't externalize. I don't have an image like Lola, although I absolutely love the idea of Lola and I can't wait to have a look at her. But for me, it's about finding the freedom. Like, the word I use is curiosity, finding the curiosity to go, oh, I wonder what's around the next corner. Because then you're not criticizing, you're not going, what does it say about me if I do this or do that? You're going, ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
I
love that.
Do you have any sort of a muse?
I definitely look back at what I've had published, and for every character, there are at least 3 real life areas that I can see in the colour mix. So a question that I've had a lot over the years, not just about my stories, but other writers about their own stories, worried that people will go, is it real? Is it real? Is it real? And the answer is, even if you tried to recreate a human being from your own perspective, it's not going to definitively be that human being. They're going to be different with all their friends and everybody in their lives. But there is an essence of different people that I can see in these characters. So I would never, ever, ever reproduce something from life. So that shows you that everything is a muse, that they become ingredients, they come together. Do you know what? Actually, you know how I've just said, no, I don't, and explained very clearly why I haven't? Yes, I have, and this is him. For those of you not being able to see this, behind me on the wall is David Bowie.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yes.
And what he's there to be a reminder of, and maybe he's my Lola in a way, is that he did not think, oh, no, I couldn't possibly have a total stylistic change, image change, play a completely different character for this album to what I did last time, because I've already been seen as this, and what might people think? That is categorically the opposite of what his 50 years in music were.
Well, he went through many persona. I mean, he went through, on the wall behind you, for those that are listening to this, is Ziggy Stardust.
No,
Aladdin Sane. Okay. Then there was Ziggy Stardust, and there was the Thin White Duke, and probably lots more, I guess. But
Halloween Jack.
Yeah.
That's for another program.
We'll
shut up for hours.
We'll do a Bowie tribute program at some point.
You do know that is a legal undertaking you just made there, right?
Okay, all right. Well, we've talked about doing a Douglas Adams one, so if we can do a Douglas Adams one, we could do a Bowie
actually,
one.
On muses, there is a really important point in there that it's really good to notice the lines that we draw for ourselves, that in the writings that I thought to mention, I hadn't thought to mention Bowie because music. And when I was doing a show with Nigel Planer last week, and he talked about writing his first memoir, and I said, I'm using your poetry on a memoir course right now. I'm using it to teach. He went, oh yeah, it is a memoir. And we do that in category. We categorize without needing to. And maybe that's the paint palette. It's just being able to mix everything to your heart's content.
I do categorization. I think it's part of being neurospicy as well. It's like the full categories. If I look at a plate, none of the food can touch. And if I'm in my brain, none of the sort of like areas of writing can touch. So I find it quite difficult to sort of, categorize, like to abandon those categories and say, okay, yes, I spent this time writing. When for me, novel writing, game writing, script writing, they're all in very distinct buckets. And I think that comes from like working as a copywriter. I would never count the words that I wrote while I was at work with the words that I wrote during the day when I got home from work as in during the day job work, and the novel. And so I learned to categorize and compartmentalize where words were concerned in that regard.
That's so interesting, because why I left copywriting, which I know you kept as part of your job, and I'll do it for private clients, but the reason I couldn't do it was when I started, this is 20 years ago, I thought, oh no, it'll be great because I can do house style during the day and then I can come home and do my own thing. And that for me was not the reality, that I wasn't able to compartmentalize it. It was very much a case of learning that what I needed was to be able to find versions of my own voice in different things. And that's not to say that copywriting can't work, but it's very much about finding what works for you, isn't it? Because the whole inspiration versus perspiration thing, I put so much perspiration into, I will make this work. I was making myself miserable. Now, these days, if I put that much into something, I want to make this work, I do at least know whether it's authentic to me or just the worry of self-esteem. What does this say about me? Is it a real thing for me? Does it matter to me? And getting that perspiration, so that I guess where for me that title just keeps leading my thoughts to is that we can worry so much that it's all meant to be inspiration, that writing has to be great about yourself, having a beautiful view, sitting down and it falling beautifully onto the page.
Yeah, the divine inspiration thing.
Yeah. And it's not. It's get the vomit on the draft, the whole vomit draft phrase. Get it out.
The opposite of divine.
Yeah, the opposite of divine. And then where the metaphor breaks down with the vomit draft is you start moving the bits around and you find something divine gradually. Not to be tried with real vomit.
I think I might move this on slightly
away from
from the metaphor that you've just used there.
Okay,
it's delightful.
Well, I was enjoying it, but some of our listeners may be eating while. So this thing about inspiration, if we accept that inspiration is a fickle thing, won't be there for us every time we sit down at our keyboard or have an hour or two to write.
Hell no.
We need to find other ways of being productive, don't we? So I don't know who wants to go first on this, but what productivity hacks or techniques would you like to share with us?
My number one productivity hack is the this doesn't count run. I do this with my guitar teacher as well. The first time through doesn't count.
Yeah.
And when I do a warm up with a group, and I do this very often for myself with my writing practice. I just mainly do it with other people. So I'm sort of thinking about that first, but you get your writing prompt if that's how we're doing it, or you splurge, but this doesn't count. And that allows you to step away from the judgmental voice that is so useless for something that doesn't exist yet. There's no earthly point in going, is this any good, when you don't know what it is? How can you know if it's good if you don't know what it's for? So for me, it's all about going, this doesn't count. I'm sorry, Chris, I'm coming back to the vomit. Out it comes. Nothing beats that for me.
I absolutely agree. I try to channel back to what I was like writing my first novel. And I was fueled by fear during that entire process. And the fear was that I would never finish it. So I wrote at every given opportunity for 3 months. And I wrote the entire first draft in 3 months. And I was slightly insane during that time. But I was just getting the words down. And that very sort of focused on just getting to the end feeling is something that I do try to slip back into now, just being like, no, I've just got to get it down and I've just got to get to the end. And then I've got a first draft and then we can edit and we've got the clay to then sculpt a bit more. But you need to get the clay first. Nowadays, a lot of what I do is very sort of like emotional. I'm very character driven in my work. And so as a result, I tend to have playlists for each character, not just for the book, that I'm working on, but for each character. I listen to their playlist to get into their headspace sometimes. In other respects, if I'm really finding it difficult to work out the words, I will literally lay on the sofa, because I like to lay on the sofa and write. And I will read the last 2 pages that I wrote. And then I will get my head in the emotional space of the character and I will close my eyes and just take a couple of minutes to really sink into that feeling and genuinely feel it, which can be really hard work, especially if they're going through a lot. It can be quite draining. But once I'm feeling that feeling, then I just have to put that feeling into words. And that sounds difficult. It's not, you're sort of describing what you're feeling. And then from that, you can describe it through the character's eyes, if you get what I mean. It's like, it's a case of getting to the truth. And then from that truth, the right words come out in whatever order. And then you can put them in the right order. But, you know, like the accurate words, I think, is the way of saying it. It's accuracy of feeling.
I do something very similar to that. And I've had to train myself in it because I know it works. And yet I would feel guilty about doing it and all of that nonsense would get in the way. But if I step away from the computer, if I take myself and my notebook to the sofa, preferably if I light a candle, because you can't leave a candle unattended, which means you can't just go and do the washing, do something practical. You are there babysitting the candle. I am able to, the word in my head when you were talking about that was transcribe, that it's come into your head. Again, with the getting it out, if you're transcribing what's in your head the way I used to with a dictaphone when I'd recorded an interview in the old days, and you press stop and you'd write it down, and you'd press stop and you write it down, that transcribe feeling and taking myself away from the computer is a ritual that I know works. And the thing is that I think the reason for ages I get in my own way so much with that is that one can feel like Perspiration isn't supposed to feel like that, like all of that struggling artist nonsense that people think that the way to do it is to torture yourself. And actually, the better you get to know yourself and the more you are able to find the sense of fun and curiosity, the more you get done. And even though I know that, and even though I've experienced it, every day I have to remind myself of it, because otherwise you just go to the computer and try to sweat your way through the whole thing.
Yeah. I think you can get distanced from the material as well, because if you're trying so hard to get it out, you're not necessarily connecting with it. You're kind of at war with it. And that can be quite mentally, I think, detrimental to the work. You're literally you're staring at the screen, not in it. You're not in it. And you need to be, like, for me, to get stuff done, I need to be in it. And for that, you can't be at war with it. You have to just go with it. You know, it's kind of like embrace the chaos, but I don't like chaos. I like to be amongst the order.
But maybe it's not chaos. Maybe what we're embracing when we do that is that it's not just one moment in time and space where it's not finished. We're embracing the process, that the fact that we're in it in this moment means there was a beginning. There will, we can work out, be an end. So, you know, I'd maybe argue it's not chaos you're embracing, its entirety.
Yeah.
So what do we think about structure as a tool for helping us to be productive in those moments? So as an example, I am an audio drama person, as is Emily. We've worked together on a few audio dramas. What I sometimes say to writers, if you have designed a tight enough structure for your story or audio drama, we know what we have to write. If we know how a scene starts and how it ends, which characters are in it, what needs to happen during that scene, it really is just a case of writing that, the filler for that, I guess. Is that helpful, do you think, for our listeners? Because what we don't want, I guess, is for the days when the muse isn't around to just sit there staring at a blank piece of paper and thinking, what shall I do now?
You know, you need to get from A to B in this scene. And if you feel like going over to X to Y over here and dropping back over here, you've still got the overall structure. Yeah. I used to hate that idea so much. I really did. I hated it. It's true. It's brilliant. It's useful. It's helped me a huge amount. I hated it at first.
Because you felt it was too restrictive.
Honestly, I think this is somewhere on the neurospicy conversation. I have dyspraxia. My coordination is terrible. So give you an example of now, not at the very beginning, but now. I say now, when I was finishing Twisted Branches that came out in October, that was a short story cycle. So all the stories are relating to each other. The way that I managed to mostly not go insane, I say mostly.
Yeah, relatable.
You know where this is going. There were 2 Post-it notes of the stories and the years that they happened. And that meant that, because my words I'm all for, maths and I are not necessarily best friends. We have a respectful, distant relationship where I always use my calculator and it glares at me. So that working out the years was emotionally hard, because the thing is, when it's something you feel you're not good at, it's not just the reality of the not being good at, it's the reminder of the feeling around it. So I did a lot of work on myself going, I know I'm going to feel like this. It's okay to feel like that. You're going to feel like it. You're going to do it anyway. And it was fine. But I never, double negative coming, I never didn't have those where I could see them. And within them, I didn't make any more notes than that because it's just not really the way that I work. But I'd have my individual Word document with the contents of that story. So that unit, if you like, would be there. And it was enough structure that I could understand how the stories related to each other. It was out of chronology because I wanted to tell a story of the relationships and not of chronological life. So it was very importantly not chronological. And yeah, it was quite difficult, but that was how I stayed sane and that was how I kept the sense of fun. Robert Shearman was incredibly influential in this. So I know you'll have met lots of times, but his 3-volume short story collection, We All Hear Stories in the Dark, where it's a choose your own adventure story. Whichever way you go through it, it's like you're experiencing a completely different book. And some people will come out going scarred for life. Who is this monster who wrote this? And some will come out going, oh, no. And they're the same stories, but depending on what you've already seen, you see it differently. And I had a very helpful conversation with him when I was still in structure hates me mode. And he said, structure is what makes it fun. It's a puzzle. You can enjoy it. And that was enormously helpful to me because I had felt at some level like I wasn't invited to that party. Whereas actually the difference between finding something difficult and not enjoying it, these are not the same thing. When you thought you weren't invited to the party and then you're there and it's fabulous. Yeah. That's incredibly rewarding.
Well, indeed. So Emily, are you a person who creates structures and tight outlines for a story and then fills in the gaps?
I describe my process as the lighting of the beacons, in that I can see the next beacon and I know I've got to get there, but what happens in between is reasonably loose. And I tend to follow conversations. So especially when I'm script writing, which is a different thing entirely, really. The scenes, I know who's in them. I know what their motivations are. And I think that's a seriously important consideration in this. You have to know your character's motivations at every point of the story. And knowing that can really focus how you play them, really, in your mind and on the page. So yeah, I will start off at the beginning of a conversation and I know where it's got to go at the end. And I do kind of let it flow. When I do structure, I can find it a bit hard to just sink into it because I'm worried that I'm going to go too far off piste. It's like the difficulty sort of using the structure thing. When I'm novel writing or script writing, I can feel like it's trying to herd me a bit too much. When I'm game writing, absolutely structure 100%, like you've got your branches and you've got to know where they're going. Otherwise, you're just going to get out of control. You've got to know your, what they're called choke points, where the branches all come back together and they've got to be reasonably regular. Otherwise, it's just going to get unwieldy. Weirdly, I can do structure in that context. Novels, I need things to be a bit more loose so that I can explore conversations in scenes in audio drama. I need to give myself a bit of wiggle room because that's where the surprise statements come from, the surprise conversations, the things that I wasn't expecting for a character to say that actually are really on point. That will come when I allow myself a bit of space to get in the character's head. And I'm less analytical in that respect.
I think we must definitely talk about game writing and about audio drama writing in future podcasts.
It's so varied. That's the thing is like, and when you're writing in multiple formats, you literally can just be completely different, approaching one to the other. That's what I'm learning about myself and how I am. I could never write a novel the way I write a branching narrative, but I'm writing a game at the moment that uses the same characters as the novel, and an audio drama that uses the same characters as the novel. So I've got all of these characters at different ages in their lives in different formats, and I can't write them all in the same with the same approach. It's weird. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll explore much more of that. And, for those that may be interested, the audio drama is called The Dex Legacy. And, that's kind of the Emily Inkpen cinematic universe or whatever we
it's my franchise.
Your franchise. So another phrase that we often hear, Rachel, is that we just need to show up. This just showing up concept of writing, I think, is probably there to kind of admit to ourselves that the muse isn't always around. So sometimes it's harder. We have to just be there. We have to write. What's your understanding of that term, just showing up, and what's it mean in practical terms for writers?
Yeah. One of the things it raises for me, and one of the reasons I like it as a phrase, is that in gender terms, we, Emily and I, are coming from a history of received belief that we are there to be supporters, we are there to be nurturers and carers. And it's not that we cannot be those things while also having flags to fly. But what I find, and I'm afraid that I do see it more with women than I do with men, which I hope will change through my life, but is something that I think has to be acknowledged, is showing up and showing off can feel like the same thing. They're not. They are not. I love that phrase because it reminds me, if I don't share with the world what I have to offer the world, I can't expect the world to know about it. And whether that is turning up to write and relinquishing the control, I don't know what's going to happen here right now when it's a first draft. Yes, when you come to structuring an idea, yes, of course, you do know what's going to happen. But in terms of getting it out in the first place, which is where we all begin, it can be really hard to say to yourself, I have the right to write. I have the right to do this. And I think showing up and showing up and showing up is how all of us have got wherever we are. It's how we will keep meeting new people, doing new things. And that's why I really love the phrase. Something, I don't know if you two have examples of this, but I'm also very interested when people don't like a phrase. And this is going slightly off piste, so feel free to bring me back. But I have met people who just don't feel quite comfortable with that. And sometimes that can be because it's close to showing off. And historically, we have been told, saying you're good at stuff, don't do that. That's rude. Yeah. I have a natural advantage. I was born in California. I hide it well, but maybe I had a little push in that direction. But it is hard, but it is helpful, because if you don't show up, then the person who could have been really helped, really engaged, really encouraged by what you do never gets that. And it's not an exaggeration to say that storytelling saves lives, that we find ourselves in fiction, that emotional truth can sort of bring us back to ourselves in a way that is beyond literal truth. We engage with storytelling, and it is important. So maybe from the point of view of inspiration and perspiration, sometimes one will bring you to the page. Sometimes inspiration will bring you to the page. But when it doesn't, understanding that it's still writing if you're not enjoying it. If you're having a day where you're like, no, I can't, and just no. If you come to the desk and you write for 5-10 minutes, I don't know if you've had this, but I've certainly had it where I've been, no, nothing's going to happen. Holy, something's happened.
Yeah.
And you move that something forward.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I know that if I don't write on a semi-regular basis, it really affects my mental health. I can absolutely track a downward spiral of sort of, depression and anxiety if I don't take the time. So I've learned to sort of see it as not just something that I do for the enjoyment of it, but something that I have to do for mental health and preservation of myself. And that has sort of changed things. It's weird. It's like, if I'm feeling really down, I know that if I manage to get some words out, I will get myself back on track, and I will be able to face things with more equilibrium and with better confidence and wider things in life. Like, I will wake up the next morning feeling more secure and more certain and more invigorated, because I've been able to sort of release pressure almost. I sort of see my brain as like letting steam out of a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
You know, and like if I don't do that, I'm likely to explode in one direction or another. You know, and we've all seen pictures of the pressure cooker with like the lid buried in the ceiling and the oven like, you know, crippled and stuff. I mean, that would probably be a worst case scenario. It would take me a while to get there, but you know, I mean, it's about management of self, I think, and brain, and then that I think helps to make it a priority in a way, because it's like, if I don't do this, it's going to be to the detriment of life, to the people around me, to everything else. I have to do this as it's almost like medication. I think it's
100% medication, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I love that idea of, and again, it's another topic we must discuss at some point, but that writing for well-being, I know that's a big part of your practice, Rachel. It is something we really must discuss, and Emily, thank you
in more depth. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Can I just come back on a couple of those, just because I think they're so familiar. I'm just nodding to everything you've just said. But also, even though I know that it is a sign that if I'm not journaling in the morning, that means I'm more stressed. It means I'm being driven to the computer and the admin sooner. I've got that early sign. I've clocked it in with my coaching supervisor. I've said, I know this is a thing. And then I still don't do it, which is why I brought the candle in, because, I'm a nicer person if I've had my writing time. And if I do the journal in the morning, not only does the work go better, but the work, capital W, the writing also goes better. And what I try really hard to do is notice without judging, because noticing your behavior and being curious about your behavior is really, really helpful. But the judgment and the why aren't I doing this can come on the other end of it, can be as detrimental as the first bit is useful. So noticing your habits and investing in yourself, your creativity, your friends, your family, it's all the same thing. When we can find, and this is why I called this thing the writer's gym, because it's about finding the habits that work for you. It's about doing these little things, if not every day, then most days, if not most days, then whatever works for you, but noticing and accepting what does genuinely help you be happier and also healthier.
Being aware that you will peak and trough, and you know what was happening a few months ago. Like if a few months ago I was writing 1,000+ words a day, and that was brilliant, you know, on the novel or whatever, and then now I'm lucky if I'm getting 500 words a day. It's not bad, you know. It's you have to kind of accept that your sort of capacity for creativity will go in waves.
I would say seasons
as well. Yeah,
I think I experience seasons.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just to wrap this discussion about just showing up. I mean, I wonder whether some writers may balk at that a little bit, because just showing up sounds like something we do in our day job.
I never use the word just. I would never, ever in a million years use the word just. It's the complete opposite of human experience.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
showing up.
So the showing up thing sounds, may sound to some people like it becomes work. That's something we do in our day jobs. And I know that both of you have worked professionally as writers. So I just want to think about that. I mean, clearly when you're showing up at a day job and that day job is to write, there are different pressures. There is an environment around you that puts pressure on you to come up with ideas and to churn out numbers of words per day. How have you each coped with that?
By leaving.
Or not, perhaps.
I won't say where I was, because I won't. But when I left copywriting for the newspaper that I was having realised that in some ways it could have worked, but it wasn't making me happy. I don't think it was because of the word pressure. Actually, I enjoyed the puzzle of it. I enjoyed you need this much for a headline, you need this, you need that. It was fun doing the jigsaw, but maybe for me it was the political climate. Maybe it was socially. I just felt like I was using my powers for evil, and there's lots of other reasons, but I think it's a very personal thing, and it will be different for everybody. But showing up there every day in the physical sense wasn't working for me, and I think it maybe it's about trusting yourself to know if something is intrinsically you or not, because we can all have so many feathers to our bow, branches to the tree. We can. But if any of them just aren't actually coming from a place that works for you, and you're putting so much extra perspiration into something that isn't being matched by who you are and what you actually enjoy doing. But I would never say it's not just show up. It's showing up. The minute somebody says, "Oh, well, why don't you just act it, dear boy?" That's the old story about styles of acting, and you do have to get there in a way that is authentic to you. So I would say it's different for everyone.
I think that's the thing about, I totally identify with using your forces for evil, because the writing does still have to be intrinsically you, because you have to own it. When you go into a job like that, they're very clear about the fact that what you write is yours and you have to take responsibility for it. But that's all very well until you're receiving a brief that says what you've got to write is X and you don't agree with X. And you're still having to write it. And I wrote for medical. I was writing for pharma, medcoms. There were certainly times when I did not agree with what I was writing. And you kind of have to, like, in that job, the dark jokes, the dark humor became very real very fast. And that happens in agencies like that. Like, you get through the day and through the job by learning to be, and to just laugh about things that you wouldn't laugh about in any other situation, and it's, without going into too many details here, but, there is a certain level of, when you go to a party and you're amongst a bunch of doctors, they will just crack a joke that is so distastefully awful about, like, making fun of, like, a condition or, like, a physical state for somebody that is, and they think it's hilarious, and everybody else is standing there like, oh my God. And, you do get to that level when you're in medical environments.
But that in itself is an important writing point, isn't it? That blitz humor comes out of a situation and then it finds its own language.
Yeah.
So that is the kind of writing that emerges very authentically from some very nasty situations.
Oh God, yeah. And it sort of, then you're like, well, this is becoming part of me. And then there's a certain level of, oh God, like, at what point do you draw the line? And yeah, I mean, showing up in terms of work in that environment, sometimes I find it very difficult. And what I find difficult is the lip service that's paid in jobs that require you to do that. The lip service to, you're a writer, you'll have good days, you'll have bad days, we get it. Like, they all say that, when you're in the interview, and they'll all say, yes, we understand. Everybody, it's a creative industry and all the rest of it. But then when you are having a bad day and the words are a struggle, because sometimes my brain doesn't want to do the words, and it does take a lot of effort. And there was no leeway for that. There was no understanding. It was all lip service to the idea of being accommodating to the creative process. The reality was, we don't care. You've got to do the work and you've got to do it by the end of the day because this client needs it, which is absolutely it's fair. You're running a business, but at the same time, don't say we will accommodate the fact that the creative process is not necessarily linear or reliable to the same level every single day. Don't say you're going to do that and then not, manage expectations, don't lie. And that was the thing that got on my nerves. It's like, I get it. Tough love. This is a professional environment. You have to show up and you have to do the work. That's fine. I will take that. Lying up front and saying, oh, but sometimes it just doesn't come and we get that. No, don't do that. It's not appropriate. And yeah, maybe that's a neurospicy thing, taking people at their word and then getting annoyed when they don't follow through. But that is something that I got quite hung up on.
Can I throw one in on that, actually?
Yeah, sure.
What may or may not be a neurospicy thing, but a conversation I was having with another writer the other day, in which she talked about being particularly sensitive to what she called lying. And I've been thinking a lot about this because, in a way, what you're describing and saying, is it a neurospicy thing? The literal and emotional truth of writing are different. And for me, I guess it's about boundaries. That I know I have made mistakes where I've said with genuinely good intentions, oh, when such and such happens, we'll do this about it. And then realized I've not followed through on that. And actually, the copywriting is an example of that, that at the interview, they said to me, is it going to be a problem to you that you're not on the journalism side, that you're on the corporate side? And I said, oh, no, it absolutely won't be a problem because it's weightlifting. It's the writer's gym idea. I just kind of started that in those days. And I said, it's practicing, it's doing this, it's doing that. And it absolutely was. But I found out very quickly that it was just too far along the lines of where my personal politics, how I got on with people, it wasn't right for me. I hadn't gone in with the intention of lying, but very soon after that, I was telling myself, you lied. It wasn't wrong, but it was wrong for you. But actually, sometimes we don't know until we're there. And for me, it's about boundaries that I think maybe exemplified when it's a neurospicy thing, but I think everybody at some level can build confidence in standing up for their boundaries and saying, you said A, you've done B. Would you like me to A, do what you said you're employing me to do, or B, roll it up and shove it, leave the job?
We won't describe where this thing will be shoved at this point. But I want to
choice words only.
Yes, I'm sure many of our listeners will be able to.
Than statement.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes. There will be deductions going on in the heads of our listeners, I'm sure. I want to move this back to inspiration. We've very much been on perspiration for the last few minutes. There are times when inspiration will strike at, not literally perspiration, Rachel.
Yeah, that's a visual joke, sorry. That staring at my armpit.
Visually. So there will be times when inspiration strikes when it is inconvenient for it to strike, such as when we are out walking or when we are away from our computer in some other capacity.
Yeah.
So quick fire tips for capturing those thoughts that come to us at inconvenient times. Who's
you have a
first?
Bleep noise available to you, right, Chris? You're going to need the bleep.
Okay, yes, I'm very good at bleeping things out.
This will be a post-production bleep. Okay. Take the notebook with you, write it the down when it strikes. There are so many other things I could say, but the way that I help myself the most is by writing it down when it arrives. And this is the David Lynch go where the fish are. It's no good sitting in the middle of the desert with your fishing rod going, I'm not catching any fish, what's wrong with me? Which is what I was doing when I was a copywriter and making myself miserable. If you go to whatever is the river for you, you'll still need patience, but there will be fish. But if you, on the other hand, go, oh, what a great fish, I can't be bothered, or, oh, what a great fish, I'm too busy, or I don't have the time, which is the one statement with which people ruin their lives most repeatedly. I don't have the time. No, you don't, and it's not fair, but write it down now and you can build on it.
Well, I think added to that, one for me is I write music and I write all sorts of other things as well. And the most dangerous thought that enters your head when you've just come up with that really brilliant tune is, I don't need to hum it into my phone. I'll remember it. And
I'd have in the English language. I'll just remember it.
Platinum album by now of all the tunes that have gone out of my head because I'll remember them. So that absolutely write it down.
Another David Lynch quote on that was, I do remember him saying, I may get the number slightly wrong, it was, I think I have forgotten 3 great ideas in my life, and he knows that he's done it. And I know that feeling where you had it and you know that you now don't.
Yeah. Emily, what's your capturing trick?
Emails. So I will go into either the Notes app on my phone, because I always have my phone on me, or I will go into emails and I'll just open a draft email. And I won't necessarily send it, but it saves to drafts. So that's not a problem. I have got hundreds of draft emails in my drafts folder that I put a headline on it. Like I put the email subject line, this. So it's like a, flag, and then I will just write it in there. And whether it's dialogue, whether it's sections of script, whether it's a description of something, they're everywhere. That's a great way of capturing it. The other way, little notebooks. I like little notebooks because you can put them anywhere. They're perfect for the outside pocket of your rucksack or your handbag, where you can just grab them and a pen, and they don't take up any room, and there's no excuse for not having it on you. You can put it in a clutch bag, for crying out loud. You can literally put them anywhere. And I'm talking about, what's that size? It's
I have my quotes
A5
book.
or something.
Yeah. Tiny ones.
I have a separate one for quotes book that is dialogue, but it's like a photo album and a writer's notebook at the same time. They go back years, and you just write down things your friends say, things you overhear on the street, and they're always that tiny because you want it to strike. And they are absolutely just such lovely things to have. They used to be called commonplace books because I used to think my friend Keith had invented it when we were 15, and it turns out it was very fashionable in the 18th century.
I mean, Keith's good, but he's not that good.
But Keith's a time traveler.
I hadn't actually considered that. That was an option I didn't study.
No.
You see, it's not disproved.
So
it could be.
I have one, inspiration coming to one at a point one can't record it note here. And that's when driving. So I think most road safety organisations do tend to advise against taking written notes whilst driving. But lots of cars these days have voice interaction, a kind of, an Alexa for your vehicle. And I've taken I can make WhatsApp suggestions to myself. So I set up a group. My car asks me what group I want to send it to. I have a group with just me in it, and I can record ideas while driving and stay on the right side of road safety people as well. So
that's wonderful.
Have a word with your car, listeners, and see if it will do that sort of thing. So
that's great.
Brilliant.
I'm sure there'll be lots more tips for capturing inspiration, and if you listeners have got any, then drop us a note.
Definitely share.
We'd love to hear them because they'll be useful to us and useful to everyone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the final bit, I think, of this, we will set a challenge at the end. But just before we get to the challenge, I know that as writers, nothing makes us happier than, well, actually, there's two things. One is, for some writers, it's the writing. And for some writers, it's the just having written. So I'm going to ask this question to both of you, but starting with Rachel. Are you a journeyist or a destinationist?
Ooh.
And I probably invented two words there.
I'm going to spend too long getting upset about the construction of those words, possibly forget the question. Did we mention neurospicy?
I'll get my coat.
And come back. No, it's fine. Are you a journeyist? Okay, I know that you asked me about me, and I promise I'm not going to avoid answering that. But the first and most important thing in my mind on this is that most people, whether it's writing or organising a party, enjoy it most when it's about a week ago. When you know that it went well, none of the things you were worried about actually happened, and you can start enjoying it in retrospect. I identify with that. So that is me. The more writing I've done, the less disturbed I get by the daily of it, because there is a daily, however well it's going, there's still a some point that don't want to or can't or something. But when you know it's normal, when you have your little tick list, I do a sort of bird spotting list with my writers, bird by bird and Lamotte, things like that. The way that when you see a sparrow go past the window and you go, oh, sparrow, and you don't think worse about yourself or the sparrow, you can just see a sparrow. If you're able to do that with those thoughts where you go, don't want to, or I'm crap at this, or when so-and-so was my age, they published 20 billion whatevers, all of the stuff that goes through your head each day, if you just tick it off and go, oh yeah, that tried to stop me yesterday. I remember seeing it at 11 a.m. yesterday. Oh, look, it's 11 a.m. today. There it is again. Who knew? I'm going to carry on. Then what you're doing is you're listening to those thoughts. You're acknowledging they're trying to help you. They're not the enemy. You can give them a nice pat on the head, a comfortable corner of your desk to perch on while you get on with your life and you keep writing.
Yeah.
Nice. Emily, have you got any ideas?
A journeyist or a destinationist was the interesting use of language there. I would say I'm both. I think I always know where I'm going, but the journey has to be pretty loose, as I sort of say, if I go one way and it doesn't work out, I should be able to go back and try a different route, if that's what we're talking about. In terms of the spotter's guide that you were talking about, Rachel, I love that. It's like self-analysis bingo. And I actually have this thing I heard recently, which is, do not trust anything that you think about your life or your performance or yourself after 9 p.m.
Oh, I like that.
So it's like, if you are having self-doubt and if you are having a crisis of confidence, if it's past 9 o'clock, you can't give it any credence. You can't. It's actually helped me. I only heard this about 6 weeks ago, and I have already implemented this. Like, I will start to have like proper anxiety about something that's going on, and then I look at my my watch, and I'm like, ha 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 ha! It is 10:30.
None of it counts.
8:59.
It's relevant.
It's nice hearing you call it bingo, because when I do that, there are two games. They are both called bingo. There's excuses bingo, which is all the things your brain shouts at you in order to stop you writing. Yeah. And there's bird spotting. So I'm very happy to include those in show notes.
Excellent. Good. I like this game. And also, don't trust anything analysis-wise past 9 p.m. These are great practices, I think, for sort of belaying self-deprecation and feeling guilty and feeling all of these things, which is totally part of the writer's life. And I think that sucks, because really what writers are doing is going above and beyond to do interesting things.
Yes.
That's what we're doing, essentially, all the time. That is what the exercise is all about. We're all putting in a tremendous amount of effort and caring into this endeavor to bring ideas to life. And we all feel guilty about it in some form or other. I have yet to meet a writer that doesn't feel guilty to some degree about spending time writing and about doing the writing and about, like making it happen. There is guilt. I don't know if sports people feel this. People who do sports ball or people who ride horses or play golf or do any of those things. Do they feel bad about playing golf? I don't know. If anyone in the comments, if anyone here is listening and plays sports and that is their way of spending their time, do you feel bad about it?
And also with the guilt, you're so right. There's really two options. There's being a writer who feels guilt and therefore listens to the guilt and stops, or there's being a writer who feels guilt and therefore notices the guilt, sees it, gives it a comfortable seat, and keeps writing anyway.
Keeps going anyway. Yeah.
I think that's a great point to end our discussion and just push guilt to one side. I'm sure it
give it a comfortable seat.
I'm sure it will appear again, because, that's what writers do, I suppose. But we always are going to end these podcasts with a challenge. And Rachel, do you want to talk us through what our exercise or challenge is for this week, please?
One of the ways that perspiration is most unhelpful is through that guilt we were talking about. There's a tendency to think, I must push the thoughts down. I must lock them in this box. I will sweat. I will push on the box. I will stop the thoughts. La, 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 la. The amount of energy that goes into that, when if you just let it go and you listen and you transcribe what you hear, whether that is things that you think are mad, irrelevant, boring, then it stops being, I have to be interesting, I have to be good, and all of that. It challenges you to listen and simply listen. And my challenge to you, whoever you are, wherever you are in your writing, is to say, what if for this 1 week, I will simply transcribe the ideas I hear, and I will do it every day, even if it's 3 words. But I will transcribe something I hear without trying to edit what I haven't written and getting it on the page for this week.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Rachel. Now, I believe that people will be able to interact with you via your Substack.
Yes.
And we will put a link to that into the show notes of this podcast.
Absolutely.
We will also put links so that you can find out more about Emily, and we will share details of our workshops that we're all involved in. And I'd like to say to everyone, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe in your favorite podcast app. That will get it delivered to you every week. And hopefully you've enjoyed it enough that would be a good thing for you. So thank you very much, Rachel and Emily. That's been a really great discussion, and I'm sure something that's resonated with all writers, really. This has been an Alternative Stories production. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Writer's Gym podcast with Rachel Knightley, Emily Inkpen,
and me, Chris Gregory. If you'd like to learn more about Rachel and the Writers' Gym, please go to rachelknightley.com. To find out more about Emily, please go to emilyinkpen.com. And for Chris, go to alternativestories.com. We'll print all these links and more in the show notes for this podcast. The Writers' Gym podcast is an Alternative Stories 2024 production for the Writers' Gym. Production, sound design and editing were by me, Chris Gregory.